Piercing through the darkness with the radiant light of truth. This is the Alchemical Lantern. Good evening, everyone. This is your host, Wayne McRoy, broadcasting live this evening from my subterranean alchemical research library in the heart of Pennsylvania's Back Mountain. Good evening tonight. We're going to discuss the signs of the times. We are living in some very interesting times indeed. And we can see many things beginning to manifest in this world that align quite heavily with the biblical book of Revelation. So tonight we're going to look at some of the signs, and we're going to explore some different ways of thinking and connect some dots for you. And we'll see what perilous times we do live in right now. For many of these things have been predicted from time immemorial by the prophets of the past, by John the Revelator in the book of Revelation. And of course, we've been warned of a lot of this stuff in the biblical context for a long time, and even outside of the biblical scope of things. But it seems quite strange that all these things always seem to align with the blueprint as laid out in the books of the Bible. Now, you may call this coincidence. You may call this what you will. I don't think this discredits the scriptures any. There are some who would argue, yes, the elites of this world use this as a playbook, as a blueprint to do the things that they want to get done. So in a sense, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that may be entirely correct, or it may not be entirely correct. But regardless of what the point is, it is coming to pass one way or the other, whatever your belief is in the biblical scriptures. And all you have to do is look around in the world around you, and you understand everybody has this inherent feeling in their gut, something's wrong. Something's very wrong. And they can't seem to put their finger on exactly what it is that's wrong with all of this. What's wrong with society today? For we have backslid quite a bit in a moral sense for a very long time. Ethics, morality, all these things have been thrown out the door. We don't have core values anymore. It's really turned the way of what you would call secular humanism or moral relativism in our modern culture. They've adopted some of the precepts of science, and they've decided to discard the ways in which man should behave in this world. You see, what has happened is our culture has thrown out natural law. Now, these are the laws that have been instantiated in this place by the Creator from time immemorial. And if you don't abide by these natural laws, well, you will certainly suffer the ramifications. We've been told this in many a moral story and many a religious text for beginners. And we also see the ramifications of this come to pass in our own lives and experiences. The point being here, we exist in a place where these immutable natural laws most certainly do occur. And we need to abide by those natural laws. And some of these natural laws are moral laws or ethical laws that have been put in place. Don't harm others. Essentially, that's the crux of all of it. It's been summed up very nicely. Jesus summed it up very nicely. He said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself, and love God with all your heart." And that's the whole of the gospel. All the rest is commentary, is filler, essentially. If you do those things, if you treat your neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself, and love your God above all else, then you most certainly will be following the natural law that is inherent in this place. Now, people may argue some of the semantics of that statement. You could have your opinion about it. You could argue about it all you'd like. That's not my point here. My point here tonight is we've had the warning signs in place for a long time, and we're seeing things come to pass in this reality that just a few short years ago we probably never would have suspected have unfolded in the way that they have. And they do seem to align with what's written in the scriptures. Now, sometimes you have to apply a different lens of interpretation to the scriptures in order to see it. And this is actually something that's known by theologians and scholars alike across the board. This is a type of viewpoint of observation called hermeneutics. So if you can apply a hermeneutical lens to these things and interpret the scriptures in their most symbolic text, in their most symbolic way, you can figure out the meanings of the symbols inherent there. There's many different ways that you can read different meanings into things like biblical scripture. And this is something, there is theological hermeneutics that have occurred in the Bible and are an acknowledged thing. You can apply various different interpretations to a single text within the Bible. This is a known commodity by theologians, and sometimes, if we're not looking at it through the proper hermeneutic lens, we're missing the point altogether. That's why sometimes you can see meanings there that seem to apply, and other times you don't. And of course, you have those who will argue the literal interpretation of the Bible, which is only one hermeneutical observation point of the Bible, only one interpretation that can be given. And they do this across the board with other things too. It's not just the Bible, but I'm just speaking purely from the theological perspective. They know about hermeneutics. Theologians and scholars, Christian scholars, know about hermeneutics, and they know how to apply certain hermeneutical interpretations to the various scriptures. So when you're looking at something as confusing and convoluted as the book of Revelation, which for a long time was actually banned from the public being able to read that, you needed a priest or somebody to read that in times past and try to offer you an interpretation. And even their interpretations were messed up. But at any rate, something as confusing as the book of Revelation, we need to apply the proper hermeneutical lens, which oftentimes involves symbology, the language of symbology, which oftentimes is discussed within the secret society groups and the occult fraternities. So they understand some of the hermeneutical meanings and interpretations behind some of these scriptures that most of your standard Christians don't know. You're not taught this stuff in church on Sunday mornings. You're not taught it in Sunday school. You don't understand what's being said. And in fact, there are many preachers and pastors and priests out there that don't know how to apply these different hermeneutical interpretations to the verses, to the scripture, and be able to garner some meaning out of it. And that in and of itself is troubling, because how you interpret it is the important part with things like the story in the book of Revelation. Because you have to remember, what John, the Revelator, is describing in the book of Revelation are the things he's seeing in the Spirit, in the spiritual realms. So he's not necessarily describing what he sees happening in the physical world, which we are familiar with. This is going on in the spirit realm. Or if you want to apply maybe some of the logic of the occult fraternities and secret schools, perhaps he's seeing what's happening in the etheric subplane of this reality, or the astral subplane that we have interconnected here. At any rate, whatever you want to call it, you could argue the semantics of it all day long. He's seeing what's happening in the spiritual realms. That's what's being revealed to him in the book of Revelation when he's seeing these visions of things like the four horsemen of the apocalypse and these beasts that he describes in various ways. And these events occurring on earth, well, he's describing what's happening in the spiritual subplane of the earth, whether that be the etheric or the astral, or however you want to describe that. Whatever phrase you apply, the different secret schools apply different names to all of these things. It's the same basic concept, but what the recognition needs to be is this is some type of a spiritual plane that he's seeing these things happening, and the things that happen in the spiritual plane affect us here in the physical. This is all part of this stepping down process of manifestation as described by the secret schools. You can apply this lens of observation and hermeneutics to the biblical scripture here as well. So when you keep that in mind and you're looking at something like the book of Revelation, which defies literal explanation in many ways and has confused and befuddled scholars for centuries now. When you can look at this and understand the symbolism presented, you can know a little something as to what's happening in the spiritual realm of things and how it might look here. Well, you can make an inference as to what that might look like here. And that's what we're going to do tonight, at least for a portion of this, is take a look at things that have happened here in our real physical world that we are familiar with, our material world. And we're going to see how this lines up with events described in the spiritual realms by John the Revelator in the book of Revelation. And perhaps you'll get a better view of the times that we are living in. So we need to consider all of this as we delve into the scriptures, because sometimes we're misapplying the wrong lens of observation to that scripture, and we miss the point. We miss the meaning. So it's important that we have the correct hermeneutical lens or interpretation to see this through. And I've heard it said by scholars and by others who have studied these things that the biblical scriptures, you can apply at least 7 different interpretations to the meaning of each and every text in the Bible, depending upon this hermeneutical lens you apply to it. And often that isn't just the tip of the iceberg. There's things they teach in the secret schools, the mystery schools, the occult fraternities, that many of the theologians, the Christian theologians, don't know about. They apply different types of interpretations to these things. And it's important to understand those as well. Because, you see, if you are of the mindset that these people who plan these world events are using this as a blueprint, then you need to know what type of interpretation they're giving to the scriptures. And you can see it applied in that way. That is, if you do accept that they use it as a blueprint to pull off the things that they pull off. And maybe there is a bit of social engineering to it. But like I said, I don't think that discredits the Bible in any sense whatsoever. If anything, it reinforces the idea that this is what will come to pass. Certainly, if you have the playbook, you know what's coming. And that's the whole point. If you have the opposing football team's playbook and you're watching them run the plays, you know what's coming next, don't you? That's the whole point here. It's the same kind of a notion. So we have this outline, and we've been warned about this. We were told, essentially, that this is how things would go. You can expect to see these things. But oftentimes, we don't recognize them up front because we're not applying the correct hermeneutical interpretation. So now that I've laid down that groundwork, we're going to get into a few things. I want you to think back. Go back in time in your mind. Go back a little over 4 years ago. The spring of 2020. Particularly March of 2020. And think about the things that were unleashed on this world at that time. And then we're going to apply the interpretive lens of hermeneutics from the symbolical perspective to the book of Revelation, chapter 6. And we're going to discuss a few things, point out a few observations, and I'll allow you to discern for yourself and decide for yourself what you think of this. I certainly don't tell anybody what to think. That's not my place. I just want to give you food for thought. I want you to investigate, to do your own thinking, use your own critical thinking skills, apply your own discernment. Work out the details for yourself, because this is how life works. It's experiential. All of us are on a different path, a unique path. And we all learn in different ways, and we all are at different parts in our spiritual walk right now. on our spiritual path. We're in different places. Some of us may be a little further down the trail than others and are trying to help others to catch up. Some of us may be just on the beginning phases of understanding what's gone on in this world, and that we are surrounded by corruption, and that the times are quickening. Have you noticed that? We were warned about this. The Bible even speaks about this. I forget exactly where in the Bible, but it says, man will be rushing to and fro on the earth, and it infers that it seems like time speeds up. And certainly we're seeing that, and Art Bell referred to this as the quickening way back decades ago when he was doing his broadcasts from the high desert. So we have this notion, and we see this, it seems to be part of it. And it certainly seems like the days just meld together anymore. Time certainly flies. We're approaching something, and everybody could feel it. That's the thing. You intuitively know that we're at a precipice in humanity right now where something big is about to happen. Something big is about to happen. And we're right at the edge of that. Everybody feels it. They inherently know something's wrong. They inherently know something's up. And that there's going to be big changes ahead of us. But we don't quite recognize exactly what that is. So sometimes we turn to something like the Bible and the book of Revelation, which, as I had mentioned, has befuddled scholars for centuries. But when you apply some of the things we see in the world today, some of the high technologies we have, and some of the events that have happened, things begin to line up a little bit more clearly. And this is no different. So, like I said, this little thought experiment in our mind, go back about 4 years in time. Back to the springtime, March 2020, when the world changed forever. Think about those things that had happened. And as you think on those things and ponder upon those things, let's listen to Revelation chapter 6. Starting at verse 2. And I saw, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And I'm going to pause after that scripture. The white horse. Now, if you think back, if you were paying attention back in 2020 like I was, I recall that there was white horse symbolism all over the place at that time. And if you think back to what had happened, and we look at the scripture here, the rider of the white horse, well, he had a bow. He had a bow. But you'll notice he doesn't have arrows. And this is something that scholars had noticed and theologians had noticed. Those who analyze these scripture verses, they've noticed this. Well, what does this imply? This implies that he doesn't have weapons. It's not going to be a show of violence that happens here. And you'll notice a crown was given unto him. Well, think back to March of 2020 when the crowning achievement of the coronavirus, later to be known as COVID-19, was introduced to the world and a pandemic situation was declared. So truly, was this the rider on the white horse, as was pre-echoed by the symbolism strewn about the media at that time surrounding this? We have the crown, the corona, ever present. We have conquering. People were essentially conquered, by and large, without a shot fired. Think about that. Remember, they successfully shut down businesses for over 2 weeks, locked people in their homes. Do you remember all the ridiculousness? the fear-mongering. You couldn't go to the grocery store without putting a mask on your face and having your temperature taken at the door in some places. Now, I opposed this from the very beginning, and I got a lot of pushback in the beginning. But I was persistent, and because of persistence, through the course of time, they gave up fighting with me and let me shop without a mask or any silly nonsense like that. Remember, they put the arrows on the floors? You're supposed to walk one way in the grocery store? How retarded. And now it's coming out in the mainstream news cycle that Dr. Anthony Fauci made up all of those criteria. The social distancing, all of that. But I contest that with the social distancing. They knew what they were doing. You see, your auric field extends out about 3 feet from your body. This is why sometimes you can sense a person's presence if they're standing behind you, but you don't see them there and you don't hear them, but you just inherently know someone's there. Well, that's because your auric field extends out about 3 feet from your physical body. At least this is what they tell you in terms of the spiritual side of things in these secret teachings that they keep hidden from us. But this is a known commodity, and this has actually been measured via frequency, via photography, Kirlian photography, among other types of photography. This has been recorded and observed. But this is what the premise of the 6 feet distancing is about. Because you see, if your auric field extends out about 3 feet and somebody else's extends out about 3 feet, well, that's 6 foot radius there, wherein at some point perhaps your auric fields could cross paths and you can have human connection with somebody else. You ever get uncomfortable when somebody gets in your personal bubble? Well, this is why. I mean, this is certainly something that's been observed and measured in many ways. Of course, they'll call it pseudoscience. But metaphysics, folks, is just as important as physics. It's the obverse side of the coin. They're both one and the same thing. It's just different lenses of observation or ways in which you measure or view these things or observe these things. So at any rate, that seems to have been on purpose. So I don't know if I necessarily buy that that portion of it was contrived. I think there were dark forces involved in making that decision. Why 6 feet? Seems like a really odd number, doesn't it? To just arbitrarily say, why not something a little bit more user-friendly, like 5 feet or 10 feet, 2 feet even? Why 3 feet? Why 6 feet? Well, this explains why, if you look at it from this occult angle of observation. They know this because they were trying to separate people. Division. Isolationism. Isolating people. That was one of the main motivations behind all of this. This further isolating of people. And we see the harms that have come from that. But at any rate, I don't want to get too caught up in a side tangent on that. But certainly this is important. So we see, was it possible that this was the unleashing of the white horse, of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse on the world at that time, and this is what it physically looked like when it manifested? We have all the symbolism present. Perhaps some of you remember what the deal was with the white horse symbolism at the time. I only vaguely remember about it because there were so many things coming at us so fast at that point. It was just maddening. It was mind-boggling, the amount of information that was flowing around and the efforts we were making to try to expose this even back then. And sadly, not as many people heard it who should have, let's put it that way, as who should have heard it and heeded the warning. But I do distinctly remember the white horse symbolism being attached to this. But let's continue on. Revelation chapter 6, verse 3. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon, to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. I'm going to pause after that. Did we not see, a short time later, after the initial rollout of all this COVID pandemic nonsense, did we not see war break out in Ukraine with Russia? Consequently, Russia, what color do you think of when you think of Russia? Well, of course you think of red, don't you? And then things escalated from there. Later, we had the events occur in the Gaza Strip in Israel. And now we have these two giant proxy wars going on at the same time, and that's not even counting the other wars that are escalating around the world as well. These conflicts. Did the rider of the red horse indeed take peace from the earth? That they should kill one another? We have all these battles waging around the world. We have gang violence everywhere. We have violent events occurring in all corners of the earth at this point. Things are escalating. It's ramping up. Now, I do tend to think media often hypes a lot of this and is part of the problem. But you see, it's about perceptions. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. The media is there to influence your perception of reality. So if you perceive it to be so, in a sense, is it not so? So we hear of wars and rumors of wars who Christ himself warned us about. In the book of Matthew, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, certainly we have that, and that attaches to this notion of the red horse. So think about that. Like I said, this is food for thought. If you use the proper interpretation of the signs and symbols and see the signals, I mean, it looks pretty plain as day, doesn't it? When you understand the crown, the corona, handed to the rider of the white horse who went about conquering without firing a shot. And then, afterwards, one of the ramifications thereof is always inherently warfare. You needed to have the violence set up next. And you'll notice that, like I said, things have escalated, and one thing leads to another with this. So that's the first two horses. The first two horsemen of the apocalypse right there. Now, back in 2020, I had publicly discussed with some various folks on air the same notion. Were we witnessing the unleashing of the white horse, of the four horsemen of the apocalypse at that time? I speculated maybe. Now, in hindsight, I could look back and say even more so, hey, it's definitely possible. And now, not only that, now we've got other horsemen that if you apply the correct interpretation, you can see inherent there as well. So we have all of these wars and conflicts, proxy wars going on that here in the U.S. we are unwillingly funding through our tax dollars, which doesn't make a lick of sense because they could print money out of thin air, and they do print money out of thin air. So why attach the debt to us for that? And who exactly do we owe? And why are we sending all kinds of money and military equipment everything to these foreign lands. But that's a more political discussion that we may have some other time. But relating back to what we're talking about, the red horse, given unto him a great sword. A great sword. But let's look a little further down the road here and see what perhaps we could see happening in real time right now. And when he'd opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. A pair of balances. Well, if you read the symbolism, the balances represent economic factors. Money and wealth management, resource management. The black horse. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine." So most certainly we could infer from this the scales represented here, the balances that the rider of the black horse held. Of course, this relates to economic troubles. A measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny. It's talking about runaway inflation, economy destroying inflation. And you'll notice the caveat at the end here. And this is the one that's the real tell in all of it. And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Well, what is that referring to? The oil and the wine, symbolically. In this verse, this represents the wealthy, the rich, the elite. Who has suffered least through all of this? The wealthy. They haven't been hurt, have they? In fact, their wealth has increased exponentially in a record manner. The ultra-wealthy, the elite class, they've prospered through these troubled economic times that we have right now. And it's spiraling out of control. Was this the unleashing of the black horse upon mankind? And you could go back and look at the red horse, the violence. Remember, before even the war in Ukraine and Russia broke out and all of these other conflicts arose, we had other things going on. You remember the George Floyd incident. We had all of these racial tensions all of a sudden mounting. We had all of this violence inherent with that in the heart of all of this corona nonsense. So now we're up to 3 of the 4 horsemen, are we not? Think about that. If you want to apply this way of thinking to this, it most certainly fits. So we had the white horse going out to conquer without firing a shot. The advent of the coronavirus, COVID-19, the scamdemic, however you want to view this, it fulfilled the unleashing of the white horse. Then the red horse was unleashed. We have now new racial tensions that were suddenly escalated. Wars and rumors of wars all over the place. Proxy wars. Conflict. Violence. An epidemic of violence. And now we have runaway hyperinflation. Whole economies are beginning to suffer for this. There's a lot of people that are struggling financially right now. I totally understand their plight. It's not easy. I have 5 kids. You don't want to see my grocery bill, especially these days with the prices of everything. It's outrageous. I don't know how people could continue to live like this Something's got to give, and something is going to give. And we're just about to that precipice. So here we have 3 of the 4 horsemen unleashed over the course of the past 4 years. But what do we know about this 4th horseman? And how can we maybe apply this same lens of observation to that? Let's read on and see what Revelation chapter 6 can tell us about the 4th horseman. And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. Well, let's ponder upon that for a moment. 1/4 part of the earth. To kill with sword, or via violence, with hunger, starvation, the destroying of economies and livelihoods, and with death, which is pretty self-explanatory. Death from other means other than violence or starving to death. What kinds of death could this be? Oh, I don't know, maybe manufactured bioweapons, or maybe diseases. And the beasts of the earth. Haven't we heard of increased frequency of shark attacks and stuff in recent weeks in the media? Animals that don't belong in certain areas invading those areas. Potentially deadly animals. And of course, we're beginning to see the mainstream media in the very, very beginning stages of perhaps recognizing that there may just be a problem with these COVID vaccines that they coerced and forced people to take that didn't want it. And now we're beginning to see an uptick in deaths associated with that. It's part of the new normal. Children having heart attacks, healthy young professional athletes dropping dead on the playing field, turbo cancers, immune disorders, people just suddenly died suddenly, has become a thing. Could this be a big portion of this symbolic figure of death riding the pale horse, killing 1/4 of the Earth's population? I wonder what things are going to look like the next several years. Remember back, we were talking about this way back in 2018, 2017. 2016. I was talking about it on my little blog post that I had on Facebook at that point. Didn't really get attention. I wasn't really public at that point. Had very few people that actually read it. But there's a logistics network called Deagle. And they reported in a 2016 publication of theirs that they were predicting that by the year 2025, the population of America would decrease by a very massive number, that the population of the United States of America, in their projection for the year 2025, and this is a legit logistics research firm for military intelligence folks that did this and put this publication out there. They were predicting, if I remember correctly, the U.S. population to be roughly 80 million or some such thing, 60 million to 80 million, somewhere in there. And if you look at the outset of 2020, the population in the U.S. was a little over 330 million. So in a short 5 years, they're predicting that drastic of a drop in the population here. You see, they've been telegraphing this stuff for a long time, and that was in 2016, if my memory serves me correctly, that they put out that publication. And of course, those of us that were looking at that time, well, we're just a bunch of conspiracy nutters, tinfoil hatters, worried about nothing. It's nothing. These are serious logistics firms that make predictions for militaries, for industries, for corporations, big businesses. There's a lot of money riding on this. They don't make arbitrary projections like that for no reason. Perhaps they knew something. So think about that. If the numbers were dropped that drastically, and it wasn't just the U.S. in their publication, other places the population numbers had dropped as well, significantly. And of course, they've been talking for years about some type of a pandemic situation, which may cause massive death. Things like bird flus. They've talked about these things for a very long time. They did training exercises, simulations of many of these events. Could look them up. Look up a couple of these. Event 201, that one comes to mind immediately because that essentially was COVID, was what COVID became. Just a few months, actually 44 days prior to its release on the world. Exactly 44 days. I cover that in my book, The Demic of Pan, if you're interested. But that's just one, Event 201. There were other ones that predated that. There's the SPARS pandemic. Jason and I covered a lot of these on Secrets of Saturn live streams way back 4 years ago. The SPARS pandemic. Dark Winter. That was the name of another exercise. Do you remember when Joe Biden promised us a very dark winter, and essentially the White House was telling us that those of us who were unvaccinated were in store for a very dark winter? That we could expect sickness and death that winter. Do you remember that? I most certainly do. I have no respect for these people. They're a bunch of eugenicist scumbags. They're total garbage. And many of the people who were pushing this at the topmost levels need to be held accountable. And that is the problem. Who will hold them accountable? You see, when the whole system's rigged, it makes it very hard for them to face the music. But I assure you, the piper is calling. There's no escaping the results of the violation of natural law in this way. Violating the free will principle of people, coercing people, essentially giving many people no choice but to submit to their dictates. Now, there's a small percentage of us that stood strong, stood our ground, and stood on our convictions through all of it, and drew our line in the sand and said we're not crossing that. And we haven't. And I think that number of people was larger than what they would have liked. I had heard a statistic not that long ago. That statistic was they projected the number of those who took at least one of these COVID vaccines, and that was 69% of the entire world population was predicted or was projected at this point. These are the numbers they gave. This is what they said they were able to accomplish. 69% of the entire world population took at least one dose of these kill shots. But you know what? That means 31% of us didn't budge. And in the view of the power structure of the controllers of this world, that's too high of a number. You see, they always look for that perfect parietal split. 80-20 is the split they need. So if they had only 20% of us that did not comply, then they would just go ahead and continue their plans. But because there were more of us that said, wait a minute, something's wrong. I'm not doing this, no matter how uncomfortable you make me about it, no matter how many treats you offer me to go do this. Remember the nonsense? Remember the nature of this? They coerced people into going and getting these COVID shots by giving them like free donuts and retarded stuff like that. And people ate this up and they went and they did this. And then they put their little stupid thing on Facebook. I got my COVID shot. Here's my vaccine passport. Retards. Retards. You're giving away your sovereignty, your free will, your rights, your human rights, your innate human rights that you are endowed by God, the Creator, that no man can take away from you. You don't need a piece of paper to prove that you've been vaccinated. Vaccination. This was a major telling point in all of this. You see, far too many stood up. And I think the next time they may attempt this, it's going to look a little different. Because there are those that remember the hell that they had unleashed on Earth during that time. People had loved ones dying in the hospital and they couldn't go in to see them because of the protocols. They had no rights, they had no voice to speak for them. I personally know people whose loved ones got sick with this alleged virus and went to the hospital, and they used their protocols, their deadly protocols, and many doctors and nurses began to see through this and understand what was killing these people. It was the protocols. They would give them remdesivir, which many doctors began to call by the moniker, "Run, death is near." They would give them remdesivir and put them on a ventilator, and they would die. I've known several people this happened to. And it was the hospital protocols that did it. It's heinous, but this is what went on. And now we're seeing the ramifications of the vaccine that they forced people to take and coerced people to take. We're seeing people developing new, unprecedented forms of autoimmune disorders, turbo cancers, myocarditis, people dropping dead for no apparent reason, blood clots, strokes, all kinds of irregular things that have never occurred before. At least not throughout the course of my lifetime, or my parents' lifetimes, or my grandparents' lifetimes. Yes, there were always illnesses that could be deadly, but there were never these rates of cancer, autoimmune disorder, heart disease, illnesses, things of that nature as there are now. So could this potentially be one of the ways in which 25% of the world population will be culled in this timeline that we're given, that we're looking at in the book of Revelation? It would seem to me that we're somewhere between the unleashing of the third and fourth horseman. I think the fourth horseman may have been unleashed. But it's just a matter of how quickly are we going to see this decline in the numbers of people in such massive amounts. It's beginning to escalate, and of course some of those who have claimed knowledge about this technology, this mRNA technology, and the things that it was designed to do, have made claims that it was designed to destroy your immune system. It was just designed to destroy the human immune system. And this has been demonstrated in scientific studies to some degree or another. It destroys the human immune system. And over the course of time, your immune system weakens all the more, and you become sicker and sicker. And it's like a ticking time bomb. And the one guy, I can't remember his name, but he was a well-known doctor to some of the very wealthy elite establishment people, and he was highly regarded. And he had said to somebody in an interview that this will begin to kill people off in between 5 and 10 years is when you'll start to see massive numbers of people dropping. You'll begin to see the beginning phases of it within 2 to 5 years, is what he was saying at the time, and certainly we do see that. And it's increasing. And he said the more of these shots you get, the quicker it kills you off. And we've all heard things like this. And I can't necessarily say that this is true, that what this guy was saying is true, or that others who claim to know are saying it is true. But we do see that they have published scientific papers, scientific studies that show things like VAIDS, vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This was talked about. You didn't see it too much in the mainstream circles, but if you were paying attention to the medical literature and to some of the quote-unquote conspiracy nuts out there who've been right about an awful lot, we were watching this. We were looking at this stuff. It destroys your immune system. It's designed to do that. And we're beginning to see people take ill. We're beginning to see a lot of the died suddenlies. It seems to be heading in that direction. Could this relate to the pale horse of the book of Revelation? Seems logical. The pale horse. Another symbol that we see representing death, decay. And we have all these things that have gone on over the course of the past 4 years in a very short time. We have seen these things unleashed on humanity. Are we witnessing the signs of the times as put forward in the Bible? Seems to me could be possible. Could be very possible. Plausible even. And even if you take the stance that these controllers of this world use the Bible and the book of Revelation as a blueprint to unleash their plans and socially engineer the masses to believe the certain things they have, well, maybe you're right about that, but that doesn't make it any less true, does it? In fact, it makes it all the more true. We have the playbook. You can know what's coming next. Read it. What's the culmination of all of it, though? Well, you see, they've completely transformed society through the onset of this alleged pandemic, and they've completely transformed the medical system. They're transforming the economy. They're transforming the way business is done. They're trying to digitize everything, move over to digital currency. It's the one world government, the one world religion, the one world order the New World Order. This is what they're trying to instantiate in place. And all of these things are a means to get there. So where does this all lead? This corruption of the medical system, of the money system, all of these interrelated things, the mass culling of populations, well, it all invariably leads to the digitization of human consciousness, a digital ID, complete with all of your medical information and biometric data. Your passport will be attached to that. Your vaccine data will be attached to that. Your bank account will be attached to that. Your social credit score will be attached to that. All monitored by an artificial intelligence surveillance system, the beast system, the Antichrist system, if you will. And the ultimate insult will be coming forth, I'm sure. You see, they're working very mightily towards the complete digitization of human consciousness. It began with technologies that we have now, social media, computers, cell phones, all of these tracking and surveillance tools that influence your behavior. Well, they want to make that all the more invasive. So eventually it's going to be directly attached to your brain so that the thought police will be a real thing. So that just thinking a certain thought might deduct points from your social credit score, and you might not be able to shop at your local supermarket, or you might not be able to travel if you don't have enough points, if you're not a good kid and listen to what Big Brother tells you to do. The collective consciousness, the Borg mindset. What else do we know about this? What else can we say? It's all about this advent of transhumanism into the world. That is most certainly the end game of all of it. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. And we'll close on this thought. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. What is this talking about? The abomination of desolation. Well, this is the defilement of the temple by Antichrist, who will set himself up in the temple and say he is God, claim to be God, in the temple, the holy place. Where is the temple, the holy place? Know ye not that ye are the temple of God? So the Antichrist being the first fruits of the transhumanist movement, the first post-human, will set himself up in the holy place. This is the combination of artificial intelligence with human intelligence integrated into this collective mind, this collective hive mind mentality. When man becomes a digital creation, his consciousness becomes digital, becomes merged with the machine, this will be the advent of this. This will be the abomination of desolation of the temple. For know ye not, ye are the temple. Anyway, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank you all for tuning in. We'll catch you next week on the Alchemical Lantern. Have a good one now.